Welcome everyone to the Marxist Project. This is a little bit of a different format from what you are probably all used to. After doing a video on Soviet cybernetics, I was approached by CibCom, a group that works on economic planning theory. They asked me to host an interview where they could introduce their new English-speaking section and give an overview of their goals and activities for people who might be interested in their work and might even be interested in contributing to their project. So, without further ado, if you could all tell me about yourselves, who you are, how are you connected to democratic economic planning and CibCom?
So my name is Pepe. I come representing the CibCom Spanish group. I took interest in economic planning because one of my close friends is a graduate in philosophy. He's been a Marxist for a long time. I've been a leftist leaning person for a long time. And he introduced me to CibCom because he knew I had experience with scientific publishing or scientific communication, and he wanted me to participate on the booklet that CibCom published. So that is pretty much just my association with the group. Now I work with them. I usually make thumbnails for the YouTube videos or for the articles. I make graphs as well for the articles. I do pretty much use graphic design stuff for them. And that's it for me.
Hi, so my name is Leon. I am a physics grad student. I don't have any real formal background in economics or planning or so forth, but I found this space last year, and I realized that this is our only real shot at dealing with things like capitalism and climate change, and it matters a lot to me that we have a livable world, and so I'll do what it takes to make that happen.
Hello, my name is Alejandro. I came to CibCom a different way, I think. I've been working in tech for 13 years, writing software, 12, 13 years. And in that time, I wrote a lot of code, and it became clear to me that software is useful. So it's kind of obviously useful. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But I realized no one had ever really articulated how it could actually be useful, like, for people. The tech community doesn't have any sort of like affirmative vision for a better world. And I think we all know what that's like now, right? We see the tech world that they're making. So that got me interested in the work of cyberneticists like Stafford Beer. And then from there, I found CibCom and I joined.
Great. Actually, I think that's a good segue into the next question, which is, what is CibCom? How would you define your activities and mission as an organization?
CibCom started as a group which has been working on translating the work done by some authors like Paul Cockshott on democratic economic planning. The group started as an internet forum because Maxi Nieto, one of the authors of cybercommunism, started gathering emails with the intent of making a research group about this. And then this last few years we have been developing our own materials and our own views on what cybercommunism is, and we've recently done some talks at events at even Netherlands, US, Canada, which I think Canada is where Alejandro met us, and we also done some things with the Spanish Communist Party, and we have been translating our works to English, Russian, and Portuguese, I think. So, all in all, our mission is just to put these ideas on the forward, on the, how you say, the idea of economic planning back into the debate of leftist ideologies, because we feel like since the last 10 or even like last 20, 30 years, economic planning has been literally abandoned by the left-leaning theorist.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly valuable contribution. Perhaps the most important thing that leftists should be thinking and working on right now.
I think it's important to bring these ideas to the forefront of organizing in particular, especially the rank and file of organizing groups, anyone from climate activists to the degrowth space to trade unions and so forth. These are the people who are going to have the most interest in seeing these ideas put forward, because we have to find some way to stop our death spiral towards climate catastrophe.
Going back to your question, with the most important elements of our project right now is we do have a web page and a Twitter account where we do science. Well, it's not science communication; it's communist communication on like the topics we are interested in, like direct democracy and economic planning. We do our own articles, and pretty much we develop the ideas or translate these authors, which sometimes are like Soviet economists or something, and we translate into Spanish or English, and then we serve as a platform to debate these ideas and then to like I guess just like they said, like put them on the forefront of political parties or any other political group.
So there are various criticisms of central planning, and they've promoted the notion that preserving market structures, aka market socialism, while still moving to a socialist economic model is the right approach, basically. Um, so, with the historical failures of planned economies in the past, even a lot of socialists have given up on the idea of planned economies and have opted for versions of market socialism instead. Why do you think we should work towards a planned economy of some sorts? And how could we avoid repeating the mistakes of the past?
So this is a big question with a lot of big parts. The first big part of this question is, why can't markets save us? What's wrong with them? In short, markets evolve automatically towards extreme wealth and income inequality. Solving past injustices and instituting equality of opportunity as a legal right alone won't solve this problem. You can give everyone in the economy the same amount of money, and you'll still end up with inequality. You'll still end up with extreme inequality within a 5 to 10 year period. It's a very fast thing that happens. And what happens is you have a few randomly wealthy people and a lot of poor people. And the wealthy people can begin to accumulate resources. They can exert control over the mass of poor people, and they can end up establishing a ruling class. So anytime you have an economic system that operates on money and markets, you're going to end up with the sort of extreme inequality that generates capitalism. And so markets cannot save us.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that like a lot of, if presumably socialists are in favor of like democracy in general, and even, a lot of, especially on the American right, we've co-opted markets as being like some sort of quasi-democratic instrument, like everybody gets a vote. But I think that's markets are you inherently give people with more dollars more votes, right? So if the alternative to economic planning is basically a voting system that lets rich people decide what our economy does. And this is something we can see in our regular lives. Like in my job, I'm a software engineer. It's really hard to find a software job that helps people. It's really easy to find one that surveils people. That's not something that regular people voted, right? That's not something we want the economy to do. That's something very few rich people want the economy to do.
So here's another way to look at it. Any social system is kind of like a game, right? The way you win the quote-unquote game of money and markets is by acting like a capitalist, because firms, which are, firms or corporations or whatever, these are the basic units of activity in the economy, and they have to optimize or maximize profits or they go under. And so the only thing they're materially capable of caring about is profit. Is profits, and we can step out of that framework with a planned economy. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So an example to concretize what I'm getting at here is, imagine you're an oil company and your oil rigs are about to expire, but you and your business partners also have a bunch of refineries that need to keep running or they'll depreciate. What set of behaviors in this situation optimize for growth and profits? The oil firm will go to the investors and say, hey, we're about to lose our oil rigs because they're too old. Help us build new ones so you can maximize returns on your refineries that still have 30 years left. And then 30 years down the line, the oil company goes to the same investors, many of them are the same people even, and says, hey, the refineries that we built are getting old now, so let's replace them in order to maximize returns on these new oil rigs that we built a few years back. And this sort of death spiral just keeps on going. I like to call this investment inertia. Investment inertia is a central feature, not a bug, a feature of capitalism. And it's that combined with other things, like markets being very unequal, that leads to us being unable to solve issues like climate change with market-based solutions. They have not worked. They are not going to work.
This is I don't know if you're familiar with this story, but are you familiar with the story of margarine?
No.
Margarine might be the best example of what you call investment inertia that I know about. So margarine is a patent. The patent for margarine was actually held by whaling companies. And the reason they did that is because people were moving away from whale oil, but they already had invested in all these ships. They had all this whaling infrastructure. So they were like, what do we do with this? I don't know, let's feed people whale oil. This is the perfect example of what you're talking about.
So the next big part of the question here is, how do we get rid of money in markets exactly? We have these ideas that maybe we can plan the economy. That's been tried in the past with some degree of success and some degree of failure. So a natural question to ask is, okay, can we make it work in the modern day? And if so, how do we avoid the mistakes of the past? So first, there's a lot of different ways to handle distribution on local scales and on global scales. One way that's been proposed, and you can read more about this in Towards a New Socialism by Cockshott, Cottrell, and Michelson, or just the first two, I guess.
No, just
is using a system of labor credits. So essentially, you are issued labor credits in accordance to how long you work, and then when you use them to obtain the goods that you need at a shop or whatever, they're deleted from existence. They don't transfer from one person to the next. They're just, it's like that, once you use them, they no longer exist. And that prevents labor credits or labor tokens from accumulating in people's accounts. And you can prevent the generation of an extremely unequal society that way. There are some details here and there on how we keep inflation from going on. We can introduce different types of taxation if we want, or however, point is, we can move away from money in a way that makes sense, in a way that fits with our modern world. So what do we need? I guess a natural question to ask then is, what do we need to make a planned economy work? In a technological sense, in an infrastructural sense. We need 4 basic ingredients. We need the internet, we need cloud computing, we need big data analysis, and we need the SWIFT banking system or something equivalent to that. And for those unaware, the SWIFT banking system is the electronic system of banking that every store and finance institution in the Western world uses. Every country in the world has something like that set up. And the institution of a new remuneration scheme, the institution of a replacement to money, will be built on the back of that infrastructural base. The planned economy will be built on the internet. It's an information age idea that requires information age infrastructure that did not exist until only 30 years ago. So the ability to have a democratic planned economy has only existed for a historical eye blink. We haven't had any projects spring up on a large scale that put these ideas into motion yet, because these ideas were only just put into physical existence a couple decades ago.
When the Soviet cyberneticians were planning the economy for the next 5 years, you have to take into account they were doing the math with pen and papers. There were rooms with lots of people doing multiplication and matrix multiplication and stuff. Like that point, you have that there's having an historical eye blink. Like we now have developed our technologies enough to make this the planning of the economy not only possible but optimal in a way, right? Like there's an argument to be made that like we now can manage our production better if we do not rely on the markets. But I think you will get into this.
Yeah, so the last big part of the question is, how do we avoid the mistakes of past planning experiments? And we have to, in order to do that, we have to know what those mistakes were. There's a few that I've identified, reading different books and so forth. But so one big thing is, because in the Soviet Union, the planning experiment that they set up relied on people calculating matrix multiplications by hand, you couldn't plan for every type of usable in the economy. You couldn't plan for every type of thing that people use. You had to take everything that people use, and you had to put them into bins. You had to put them in these conceptual boxes. That's called aggregation. And the planning system would plan in these aggregate terms, in these very coarse aggregate terms. So imagine it like you're trying to navigate a room, but you've got glasses on that make everything fuzzy. It's not going to go so well. You're going to stumble into things. And that's what happened in the Soviet Union. For instance, if you plan for just pants in general versus planning for jeans and sweatpants and shorts separately, right? If you just plan for that one broad category, you're going to end up with supply-demand mismatches. And you're going to end up with unmet needs, and unmet needs are where black markets come from. And the goal of any planning system should be to meet everyone's actual real material needs, so that we don't have a need for these capitalist institutions to spring back up out of the abyss. And another mistake that the Soviet Union made was they didn't plan in kind. What I mean by that is they didn't plan in terms of, okay, here's how much steel we need to make. Here's how much lumber we need to make. Here's how much raw iron ore we need to mine up this year. They planned in terms of money. They planned in monetary terms, being like, okay, so this production center has to produce this much of this kind of good, right? But if you only give the production center a budget, and if that production center has more than one thing that it produces, then there's no real way to tell how much of each thing people will really need. And that also led to a lot of unmet needs in the Soviet experiment. And lastly, there are other big errors that the Soviet Union had, but the last one I want to touch on right now is they had a more bureaucratized planned economy. What we're proposing is not like a bunch of people sitting in a room being like, what should we do in the economy today? No, what we're proposing is more along the line of a computerized solver to decide a computerized solver to decide how much of what is produced, but then we inform that solver from bottom up, from the people directly. So we have perhaps community congresses. That would be one idea for an institutional extension of a post-capitalist society, which is able to measure people's needs. It's able to see what people's real needs are, because the community congresses are where people go to just talk amongst one another and get to know one another, get to know each other's needs and lives and so forth. And if we have if we have a society that has a high degree of solidarity, that will make it a lot easier to inform our planned economy in a way that those needs are actually met when they need to be met, not after. Because another big issue with planned economy is, okay, how do we make sure that people will have what they need when they need it? And that is something that a computerized system will help us to do, because we can calculate things fast enough to respond almost in real time in many cases to changes in people's needs. So you can think about it like kind of how Amazon or Walmart does their planning, in that they will modify how much of what goes to each distribution center almost on a daily basis even. But in that case, though, Walmart and Amazon, they're trying to maximize profits. With a democratic planned economy, we can express our goals in terms other than just monetary ones. We can express our goals in any terms we want, and we can find new, better, more creative ways of seeing what people's needs are, so that we can respond to them in a more holistic and complete way.
That's very good.
Excellent. Yeah. And it sounds like, so what CibCom is working on and proposing is both, expanding the sort of, if you will, resolution of the planning problem using more advanced computing potential that didn't exist before, but also definitely a change in the methodology of planning itself. And it appears that it's going to look rather different from the approach that was maybe taken in the Soviet Union. And I think that that's certainly the most promising direction, and one that assuages a lot of the concerns that people have across the political spectrum about planning. So I think we've already talked a lot about, what this is going to look like. That was kind of going to be the next question. Is there anything else that any of you wanted to add to, the question of how do you establish socialist economic planning?
So this is a tricky question, and one we have discussed internally. For us, like being like the political group, being CibCom, we value anti-sectarianism a lot. And what I mean by that is that seeing the political space on the left, you can see just certain groups just battling each other. Like when you only need to go to Twitter, for example, or well, now it's called X. You only need to go to X and see Marxist-Leninist arguing with anarcho-communist and telling each, I'm fighting for, which version of communism is more pure or more closer to the Marx ideals. So in CibCom, we try to get rid of all of that, and we try to have this north-pointing star towards, okay, this is a post-capitalist society we can all agree on. So we need this like economic planning to satisfy the actual needs of the people. We need direct democracy, and we need everyone to be So this is where we have this idea on how to build utopia, but how do you get there is very different depending on which branch of socialism you adhere to. For example, utopia could look like maybe Star Trek, like the fully automated luxury space communism, or it could look like small towns and villages where the economy has reduced in complexity a lot. Thing is, CibCom or the cybercommunism works for every or pretty much all of these ideals of what utopia looks like, and we only do the theoretical framework, because what revolution is, what it looks like, or who should lead it, or anything like those questions, you cannot find common ground between leftists, right? So, and it is not a bad thing, of course. Like for example, like people then don't agree if the USSR was socialist or not. Which, I mean, if you're debating about socialism, could be a very simple answer, which is, well, not simple. But so we offer a common ground on how to manage democracy and how to manage production. We all can agree on, but the question on how to build this is left to political parties or political movement or mass movements to decide. We just only hope to reignite the debate regarding this, which we feel is abandoned by all these political parties and movements. Though, if you don't have with the bitter taste of mouth, Maxi, which is one of our comrades or one of the authors we follow on the group, is doing some academic publishing on this, and is doing a kind of institutional framework which is compatible with cybercommunism as he or we understand it. So there's room for discussion in this topic and how this institution could and should be implemented. Like Leon, before he mentioned, like the SWIFT banking system, it is very important to say that we are not burning everything to the ground. And of course, we need to use our modern day technologies and the modern day tools that we have on hand to build communism with.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate, like, we are not proposing burning everything to the ground and starting from scratch. That seems to be an attitude that a lot of older political movements had, like in the 19th and 20th centuries, which it made sense to do that then, but it doesn't really make sense now. We are inheriting a capitalist world, and it's our job to take that capitalist world and turn it into a post-capitalist world, one step at a time.
The final thing that we were going to talk about is in a more like zoomed in sense, what are the plans for CibCom, specifically like the English section of CibCom? What are your next steps? What are you working on?
Well, English CibCom is new and we're growing. We have our friends at the Spanish CibCom, like Pepe, but we're also trying to form our own organization and we need people. So right now we're really looking for, presumably a lot of your viewers, subscribers like theory, but they don't have to, right? Like it takes all kinds to do stuff. Like here we are making a YouTube video. So anyone who has an interest, first of all, we encourage them to reach out. I assume you'll drop a link somewhere on the screen.
So I don't really have a whole lot of time to run an entire organization. I also don't have that skill set. So first of all, we need our big brother Spanish CibCom organization to teach us dumb Americans how to run an organization, first of all, in a way that'll make sense. And then next, we need to create... So I'm just going to list a couple things that I'd like to see happen with the English CibCom. I don't know... And there's no timetable for any of this. It's just stuff that I'd like to see happen. So I'd like to make a centralized and cleaned up repository of literature around economic planning, around democratic economic planning, how to do it, how it works, how capitalism works so we can understand it better, and how we can understand how we need to get away from it better. We need to reach out to organizations in the US and elsewhere with these ideas. We need to run educational workshops on the math, computer science, and physics behind planning for those who are more scientifically inclined. And so that we need more people talking about this. We need more people with thinking about these, having conversations about it, and just getting a stronger, more robust dialogue going. And we want to facilitate that. We want to do that in a non-partisan, non-sectarian way. My pet project is the Econophysics server, which you can find linked in the description. The Econophysics server is a nonpartisan Marxist server that I started a year ago to it began originally as just a reading group between some friends, but it just kept growing, and now here we are, and I'm super excited about where we're going. We've got a really good library, we've got great discussions, and we're currently reading through How Labor Powers the Global Economy by Zachariah Farjuna-Makover, which is a foundational text that you should read if you want to understand how capitalism works from the lens of probability theory and statistical mechanics.
Great. Anything
Okay,
else to
so
add?
I do have a question for Alejandro, which is kind of a... Do I need to have read the 3 volumes of Capital to join CibCom English?
No,
Absolutely not.
absolutely not.
Okay, so we welcome everyone who wants to learn about this and who has a... Like me, for example, I'm not a big theory guy. I do graphic design stuff for them. So everyone with a skill set or willingness to learn is welcome in CibCom, and well, that's it.
All who are willing to engage honestly and who are genuinely interested in learning are welcome, and the more the merrier.
Well, I just want to say I'm really thrilled that your organization is living and thriving and growing. This is not something I could have imagined even 10 years ago, someone who's been on the left for some time now. It's excellent to see that people are taking an interest in really concretely and seriously treating the issue of planning and post-market societies. And I think I'm pretty confident that most of the people who watch this channel are going to take keen interest in what you do, and I hope that we can continue to collaborate as well. I'd love to have all of you or each of you on to discuss things in greater detail. There's a million questions to answer and ideas to think about. So thank you for talking to me and explaining CibCom, explaining planning. That's pretty much all I have to ask you. It's a good closer, I think. But I open the floor to you if you have any final parting thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for providing us this opportunity, this platform. Sometimes it feels like when I'm trying to reach out to people about these ideas, about how badly we need to move past capital in this specific way, it's maddening because it's like I'm screaming into the void from a rooftop somewhere. But it's really, really good that I'm really grateful that you've put together this opportunity for us to get our ideas out to a general audience and just get more eyeballs on this, because that's what we need right now, first and foremost, before anything else. We just need people to see these ideas, to digest these ideas, to engage with them in a serious way.